The sounds of Toronto. I was waiting for that truck to pass by. Hi, everyone. How are you? It's Julia. And today I just wanted to hop on and talk to you about money mindset. So that's what I promised I would talk about yesterday. And this is pretty important. It's a very important subject for me, especially because money mindset is something that I had to consciously work on for a long time. Honestly, I didn't seek help or anything like that. I did it by myself, which meant that I took a really long time to work on it. We're talking well over a decade, actually. And it's really important because for a lot of you out there selling your products and services, the one thing that you haven't quite mastered is the issue of money. And for a lot of people, it's because money is not something that they talked about in their families. Growing up, money was not something that they talked about freely over the dinner table. It was you picked up your habits from watching your parents, watching how people interacted with money, and that's sort of like what you brought home with you and developed into your character. So really the idea of money mindset starts from this one premise. And just again, thank you for joining this video live. If you have any questions, post them in the comments. You can also ask me any of your questions as we keep going. And I'm glad that you're joining because it's such an important topic. It's something that's really near and dear to me when it comes to businesses, because money is really the fluid in the engine, right? Like it's the thing that keeps you doing what you're doing, or it's the thing that influences your decision over the kind of work that you do. So for the longest time, before I actually got into money mindset and understanding how it works and how it was showing up in my life, and just really the powerful influence that money had in my life thoughts, I was the kind of person who would sort of like get the job that paid the money. And that's how I used to get the jobs that I did. Whereas my deepest heart, my intention was to get a job in which I could use my skill sets, my strengths, my gifts, the things that were naturally given to me in the work situation. So there was always this misalignment, and there was a misalignment for a really long time. And I see that with a lot of the people that I speak with, where there's what you'd love to do, but then there's what brings in the money. And the two of them, sometimes they're not talking to each other, right? It's like two separate things. And the idea here is, how do you have a business in which you are profitable plus fulfilled? And that's my version of successful. So first of all, you need to have your own version of what success means to you. And if you want to, share what your version of success means to you, because it's important that you define it for yourself. If not, then you're always going to be looking at others' definition of success so that you can determine what that means to you. So the reason I started to look into money was because I noticed that it didn't matter how much I made. It didn't matter what kind of job I was in or what my situation was or how old I was. The money pattern was still the same, in that it came and then it left quickly. Quickly. Like sometimes I didn't see it. And that's because for me, not having debt was a high value. And that meant that I always wanted to have everything paid on time. I wanted everything paid off. I didn't want any, collections or anything like that. So before the paycheck would come in, I'd already lined up, where it was going to go, which meant that I was left with nothing. Then irony of irony for someone who wasn't into debt, because I didn't have much until the next paycheck, that meant that I was dipping into savings or credit so that I could, keep up until the next paycheck. So for me, the situation was always a running after money and money showing up and not staying. So if money were a person, it would be a bad boyfriend. It would be the person who just comes and goes. You don't know when they're coming. You don't know when they're going. You just know that they're not staying. They're not reliable, that you can't trust them, that you can't build a future with them. And so that's the relationship that I had with money. It was deep distrust. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, because I didn't seek any help and I was doing things alone, it took me well over a decade to master some of the fundamentals of money mindset and what was really happening with me and how this was playing out in my life. The good news is I went through all that pain so that you don't have to. And one of the things that I love to work on with my clients is their money mindset, because we all have stories about ourselves and about money. And with this video specifically, I'm going to talk about money. And in tomorrow's video, I'm going to talk about self, your relationship with self. So, you know, a lot of people believe that they love themselves, but then how is that showing up in their lives? And for most people, there's a misalignment with true intentions, true values, and then actually lived reality. And that's the same when it comes to money, right? All right, so this is the fundamentals when it comes to money mindset. We all have scripts that we're playing out in our daily lives. And by scripts, I mean that our thoughts inform our actions. And where do our thoughts come from? They come from this part of our amazing brain called the mind. And the mind is this intangible thing that you can't really pinpoint and you can't really see. You know, it could be hovering up here for all we know. But a part of the mind, which is the subconscious. And so the subconscious is that part of your brain that takes all your experiences as you were growing up as a child and just takes note of them and just brings them in. So up until about the age of 7, kids don't really make conscious decisions or form opinions. They're sort of like just ingesting everything that they are experiencing in their world. And that's pretty much how it goes for, you know, people. And what this means is that you watch how your parents dealt with money, or the people who took care of you, if not your parents. You watch how they dealt with money and how they talked about money and what money meant for them. So for some people, they had a healthy relationship with money because the parents or the guardians were open about it. They let the children know what was coming in, how it was coming in, how things were being paid for, why things were being bought rather than other things. And they got to see what the value system was. But for a lot of people, they just got to experience money as a very painful thing. You know, maybe the parents would always talk about money not growing on trees, or there never being enough, or that, you know, the rich were evil, or that you couldn't love God and love money, or that you couldn't be successful in your hobbies or your heart's desire, your interests in the arts, because that's not where the money was, or that they had to go to school and then get good jobs because that's what good children did. So a lot of these things were picked up growing up and then embedded in the subconscious, which informed the thoughts around money, and that informs the actions. So we all have scripts that are playing. And one of the ways to get conscious about the script that's playing in your mind is to get paper and pen. So this is another paper and pen exercise. And I'll just warn you, the same thing with tomorrow when we come to self-love. But get paper and pen and take a blank piece of paper and just draw a line right straight through the middle. And on one side, I want you to write mom. On the other side, I want you to write dad, or, you know, grandpa, grandma, whomever took care of you when you were growing up, the person who had the most significant influence over your life as a child. And on the one side, I want you to write down everything you can remember that was said to you about money from that one person. Anything that you remember being said, and if the person didn't say anything, then what did they do when it came to money? How were they when it came to money? How did they act? Did they sit up all night looking at bills, trying to pay them, panicking because they couldn't pay them? Or were they generous with the money and gave to people freely without counting? Did they run away from looking at how much was in the bank? Or were they people who knew exactly how much was in the bank? You want to write down all the things that come to your memory, that come to mind, put them down on paper. And then do the same thing with the right column. So for the dad or the grandpa or the other male guardian, then you want to write down the same thing. What was said about money? You know, what were the interactions around money? And then I want you to look at that piece of paper when you're done and circle the things that stand out to you. And what this is it's bringing to your awareness what you took from both sides. So you are an amalgamation of two different opinions. Now your parents, and I'm just going to use the assumption here, parents. Your parents may have been of the same mind when it came to money. So maybe they were both savers. They were both people who knew exactly how much the grocery bill was going to be, exactly how much was coming in, exactly how much was going out. They used the coupons. They only bought things on sale. Maybe that's how they were. Then you will see that you have those same tendencies. Or you're the exact opposite person because you felt that it was a very restrictive way to grow up, and you decided along the way that when you got money, you were going to spend it. Now, the downside to that is for people who came from a really tight money household, they tend to be spenders who don't even look at the bill, right? So like you'll go grocery shopping and you just swipe, but you have no idea how much the milk cost or what the difference between the oranges were this week and last week, or exactly how much is in your bank account. So I want you to circle down what jumps out at you, because it's going to tell you pretty much the scripts that are running in your life. And then take a moment, and on another piece of paper or at the bottom of the same piece of paper, I want you to write down the ways in which you spend money. And to be more accurate, and this is something that I'm going to challenge you to do because it's going to give you better results, I want you to actually go and log into your banking. So your credit cards, your checking, your savings, your RRSPs, all those different cards. And I want you to see where the money has been going. Because if I ask you to just write this down, you're going to write down stuff that's based on your value system, or where you think your money should go, but that does not necessarily reflect the reality of where your money is going. So if you actually log into your accounts, you'll be able to see for yourself exactly where you spend your money, where most of your money goes, and when and how. For most of you, it should go to home. Like for most of you, it'll probably be with home or anything to do with a home. So you just want to take note of these things, because that's going to tell you about your value system and also how you value money. Now, as an example, there was a period in my life when I used to, so I wouldn't drink at home alone. That wasn't what I was into, but I would socially drink. But I was in an environment in which people would drink, every evening after work, on the weekends. Drinking was just really a part of the lifestyle. And so there was a time when I would look at my banking information while doing this exercise and notice that, other than rent or mortgage, that the next huge chunk of money would go to drinking, pubs, and that sort of thing. And that's because at that time, that was the value that was high on my list, right? Like right after a roof over my head, that was the value that was next important to me. And then again, there was another time in my life when I went back and I did this exercise, and what I saw was that the majority of my money was used in school. And by school, I mean that I was taking courses, I was hiring coaches, I was going for personal development events, I was taking online courses. And these are things that you do without thinking, because you're like, oh, it's $347, $147, $97, $299. And at that time you're thinking, oh, it's I have it and I can do it, and it's not that much. But then when you add it up, you realize, oh my goodness, this is quite a chunk of change, right? So for you right now, if you go and you look at where you're spending your money, it's going to tell you about where you are in your life right now and also your values. So if you've just had a baby, then you'll notice that most of your purchases are around the child perhaps. Or if you are in school or you're in the learning mode where you're starting out your business or growing it and you want to get a lot of information, you might find that a good chunk of change is in the learning. If you are dissatisfied with your life, you might find that it's in aimless objects, right? Like maybe shopping for clothes that maybe you don't need, or shoes, or going out or eating out way too much when you actually have food in the fridge, that sort of thing. So it's actually just bringing about an awareness. Now, the one thing I do have to stress here is do not judge anything. So when you're looking at your online activity and when you're answering the questions that I asked you, this is not an invitation for you to look at this stuff and be like, oh, I'm so reckless, or oh, I'm such an amazing saver, or whatever the case may be. The idea here is just to take information. So if we want to make any kind of significant change in our lives, anything that's lasting, we have to have a very objective look at the reality of what is, without clouding it with energy or with judgment or with any particular feeling. Step aside from how you feel about how you've been using your money, and just objectively write down how you've been using it, and see what characteristics you picked up from your parents that now inform you. And then I want you to look at that list and everything that you've written down and decide what's not working for you anymore. Now, how do we do this? We tend to form our identities around the people that we look up to and we love. And it's part of how we were created. It's a bonding activity that takes place in which chemicals are released biologically. All of that good stuff happens. And the basic idea behind this is survival. So the reason you bond with the people who take care of you is not because you love them, it's because you need them to survive. And that's truly the scientific reason for that. So for a lot of people, you'll notice that when they're now adults, they realize that they didn't have a great relationship with their parents or their guardians. And there's this disconnect because there's that part of you that feels that love and wants the validation, but there's also the part that maybe has that resentment and that angst around that relationship. And that's because all the chemicals that have been released during your formative years have been so that you can survive. And how do you survive? You survive by cleaving to the person who is going to feed you, house you, clothe you. That's how it goes. Now, when we are really closely aligned with these people, we take on their values, but we also take them on as our identities. So I was speaking with a couple of ladies, and one of them, both the parents are savers. So the mom would save, and she knew exactly how much everything cost. She never spent money on anything, not on herself. Always looked for the deals, the savings, and so did the dad. And so that's how she was. And for her, that was something to be extremely proud of. And she was very proud of it. So when we did this exercise, for her, she was like smiling. She's like, yep, I'm a saver like them. I have the money stored up. I know exactly when the savings are. I know how to look at my checkbook. She was extremely happy about that. So I asked her to flip that skill set that she had developed from her parents of saving. And I asked her what that prevented her from accomplishing or getting in her life. And of course, she had to think about that because she said, well, it's saving me money. Like, I'm saving money. I said, yes. But what does that prevent you from getting? And when she thought about it, she said, well, because of my tendency to hold on to money and to look for the savings and the bargains and all of that, I don't believe in spending past a certain amount. I also don't believe in spending on myself. So for example, she had never been to a spa. She would never go for a massage. She wasn't the type of person who would go to an all-inclusive vacation in the islands. Those are things that just would not enter her head. It just would not, because it ran contrary to her value and her ideal of saving. Then and I asked her, so there's a time when this skill set was very useful for you and your family? And she said yes, because they came from hard times. And so the parents were really good savers, and that's what helped them get through the hard times. And I said, and for yourself? And she said yes. When she started her business, she had to be lean. And so this really came in handy so that she could get to the place where she was now profitable. And I said, okay, but now you have the money. So what are you not doing for yourself that you could? And it's actually having a detrimental effect on you. And, you know, after a little while working her through so that she could understand what I was asking, she was able to then confess that she had an inability to hire extra help because she just wasn't going to spend that money. She needed the help. The business was growing. The business was expanding. This would be a really good, legit reason to spend money. But she wouldn't hire help. She was trying to still do everything by herself. She wasn't taking care of herself physically beyond the roof over the head, the clothes, and the food to eat. But that meant that she was not giving herself the kind of service and attention that she wanted to give to her clients. And so this was huge, because when she came to work with me, one of her biggest things was that she wanted to give her clients a stellar experience. And so while she was very good at what she did, highly efficient, where she felt that she was failing was in giving them that, wow, 5-star experience. But when we did this exercise, she was able to see that she was not in a position to give her clients a 5-star experience or a stellar experience because she wouldn't know how to. You have to first do for yourself what you're going to do for others. If you haven't had a stellar experience, if you haven't had a 5-star experience, if you haven't had a pampered experience, then it's very hard to turn right around and then say that that's the kind of service that you're going to give people, because you have no idea what you're talking about. And I've seen that happen too in other instances where, for example, I had a client and she wanted to, it was a high-end service that she wanted to provide. And when I asked her what her experience with high-end services were, she said she had none. She had none. And I said, well, this is going to be difficult, because when you are selling a high-end experience to people who buy high-end experiences, there already is a vibrational disconnect between you, the person who's selling it and delivering, and the people who are used to buying such stuff in that space. You're not going to be speaking the same language. And the vibe that you're getting from you is not going to be high-end. They're going to see the high-end prices for sure, and they're going to see all the things that you've included, but you're going to be talking to them the way you would people in the bargain market. And by this, I mean that if you go to 2 different restaurants, okay? So you go to a restaurant that's, you know, your mom and pop, they serve all day breakfast, and then you have another restaurant in which they only open between 5 p.m. and 11 p.m. and you need a reservation to go in. I want you to take note of this. If you go to the first restaurant, the all day breakfast, mom and pop shop, like a good family place, you're gonna get a lot of food for not too much money. You probably have a menu that's got like 30 pages, right? Like you've got so many options, so many ways that you can eat. But if you go to the high-end place where, like, you know, a single entree is like $30, you'll notice that they'll just give you this one thing with like 10 choices. And the 10 choices are broken up in your appetizers, your entrees, and your dessert, which means that you're probably getting 3 or 4 options in each one of them, right? Marked difference. And yet you'll never go to that high-end restaurant and look at that one-page menu and say, oh, do you have any more menus? It's like you are in there and you sort of know what you're signing up for. So the expectancy is different, the experience is different, and not expectancy, expectation, right, is different. And so you're going to act different. Now, if you have always sold in a mom and pop shop where you have a menu with 30 items and you decide to make it a high-end restaurant where you have the same kind of menu, except that you've now made your prices $30, $40, you'll find that you're not getting any clients at all. Because the people who would show up for your 30-page menu are not going to be paying more than $11 for any single item. And the people who would pay $40, $50 are not showing up to that restaurant. And they're not showing up for that menu. And so you find that you're not speaking to anybody at all. And that's how this comes into business. So it's really, really, really important to understand where your heart is when it comes to money, so that you can align yourself. And when you do this, your products and services are going to reflect the value that you have placed on what it is that you do. If you are someone who will not spend anything on yourself, you will not invest in your growth, you will not invest in how you look, how you feel, anything like that, it's going to be very hard for you to get into the industry in which that's what you sell. That's what you sell, because people will look at you because you are the leader, and they're not going to see what you're selling. They'll hear what you're saying, but they're not going to see what you're selling because they're not experiencing it in you. So as an example, what I do is consulting and coaching and training. Now, the thing is, part of my characteristic and my value is continuous learning. And what this means is that there's never a given day when I'm not learning something. And if I'm not learning through my experiences with people, it's actually going to teachers who have mastered a skill set or a concept in which I am struggling in or I'm really highly interested in. And people like me are highly curious about lots of things, and you just go into a rabbit hole and just continue to learn about it. And so I'm continuously learning. Like, I read at least a book a week. I'm always in a course or a study. I have a business coach. I have business mentors. And I'm always placing myself in situations in which I am going to push myself beyond my limitations. So it doesn't matter what I think about anything. It's that I'm going to put myself in situations and around people who will help push my boundaries so that I can think bigger and do things more efficiently as a result. It's only because of that I can confidently do the work that I do and speak the way that I speak, because I understand the value of learning, and I understand the value of continuous education, of pushing boundaries, of doing things that you never imagined so that you can live the life that, you know, was once a dream. I don't believe in saying I wish, or if I could, or, you know. So for a lot of people, the thing that holds them back, the number one thing that holds them back is money. You know, like I'll even ask just generally a group of people, and I'll say, you know, what's the one thing that's preventing you from living the life of your dreams? And 90% of the people will say money. Between the 10%, they'll say time or family obligations. But 90% of the people say money, and they say, if I had money, then I would. If I had money, then I would. And this is the second thing now to do with money mindset. So the very first one is that having that awareness of what scripts run your life. And you know this from looking at the people who had the greatest influence on you, and then looking at how their influence has seeped into your own life and how you're playing out those scripts currently. The second thing is the idea that money comes before the life that you want. The idea that you get the goal before the work or before anything else. So for the people who say that if they had money, they would start their business, or they would quit their job, or they would do this, or they would do that, the next question that I ask them is, well, how much money would it take? How much money would it take for you to live the life of your dreams? And they all come up with their own abstract answers. And what they tell me from their answers is that they have no idea. This is not even something that they've actually sat down and written out and computed and done the math and figured out, how much is it going to take for me to do this? You know, so before I started doing my own thing, I worked for the federal government here in Canada. And it was a very comfortable, very awesome job in the sense that you just don't quit. It had all the benefits, it had everything that you needed, and the money was good. But while I was thinking about making a transition out, I sat down and then I did the math, and I said, well, how much is it going to take for me to leave my job? Now, I wasn't thinking in terms of win the lottery, it's going to take $1 million or whatever the case may be. I wanted to know in concrete terms how much I needed to survive on for a year or 2 years or 3 years. And then I needed to see if I had it, or if I had the means to get it, or if I had a plan to get it. And that's what made my decision to quit that much easier, because I had things tangibly in front of me. I was able to see this in front of me. But for many people, for many of you, you have no idea how much it costs you to live for a year, because you're sort of just going through life. But this is where, we have so many tools available to us that it's amazing. This is where you can go into your online banking, look at your credit cards, look at your personal checking and savings accounts and all the different accounts you have, and look at how much you've spent over the last 12 months. In fact, do that for all of 2018. And then put that figure down and understand that this is on average how much it's going to take for you to survive for a year. So whatever it is that you're trying to do, you need to bring in at least that much. And then do that also for your business, whatever your business expenses have been, including the things that a lot of people don't consider, like that $2 cup of tea that you paid for when you went to meet someone so that you could have a sales conversation, the gas that you paid, or even the bus ticket, whatever the case may be, you want to put that all down. If you were using the internet, you want to add that. What about the electricity that was used to run your electronics? All of that information, the pen that you bought, the piece of paper, whatever the case may be. And you want to use those figures to tell you, well, this is how much I need for the year. Now, the good thing about developing a healthy money mindset is that you're not going to look at that figure and start panicking and thinking, oh, I'll never make this. How can I make this? The idea is for you to have facts. It's for you to have figures that you can work with. So if you look at such an amount, then you can start to ask yourself, well, what do I need to sell? How many of these do I need to sell? And when do I need to sell them by so that I can be okay? But it allows you to start thinking, and we want you to tap into that creative space in your mind that allows for things to flow through, so that you are looking at your income levels and you're looking at how much you want to bring in, and even go beyond just bringing in what's going to cover you for basic. I want you to really challenge yourself to say, what is it that you want to do? So for me, travel was always high on my list of things to do, but I never traveled because I never had the money, or I never had the time, or there was always some reason. But then in thinking about how much money I wanted to bring into through my business, I started to ask myself, well, give yourself a budget for travel. And what this means is that if an opportunity comes up or if something has to happen in which you need to travel, and a really good example is like, this week, in 2 days, I'll be flying to Kenya, East Africa. I'm going for a funeral, so it's not the best reason to go, but it's part of that idea where it's like, have a bucket and have money in it, so that if you need to travel or if you want to travel, then this is something that you can do. And it's going to motivate you to work harder because you know exactly where your money is going and the kind of life it's going to afford you. So, when it comes to all this, it's all fine and dandy, but the truth is, if you have a problem seeing how you can make more money, if you have a problem seeing how you can keep money, like the way I told you in the beginning that for me, money was just something that just came and went, it never stayed, then this next part is going to be really important for you. And this is where we're going to start thinking about how to reframe our money mindset. Another blank piece of paper? Sure. So for this one, we want another blank piece of paper. And we're going to do a few things here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn money into a person. You're going to imagine that money is a person. So on your blank piece of paper, you're going to write a description of what this money looks like as a person. Is it male? Is it female? What is it? Is it a spirit? Does it come in a green flowing dress? Does it come in a business suit? Does it come as a whiff of, cotton candy in the air? Just personify money, and then have money sit across from you. So you're going to imagine yourself, or actually you're going to physically have yourself seated, and you're just going to imagine money the way you imagine money to be, to come in front of you. So for me, money is a woman, and she's all the color of envy, green. Anyway, she's the color of money, green, which is also prosperity, right? And it's also a sage green. And it's long flowing skirts. Everything is nice and loose on her. She's got the bangles. She's very carefree. Honestly, she's coming from the hippie era. She's got the long flowing hair, and she's Black from Africa. She's got everything is in green. And she's got green sandals, and she looks like she's just been walking around in meadows, just enjoying the sunlight, smelling the sunflowers, and just having a good old time. And have money sit across from you. And then you're going to have a conversation with money, and you're going to write down everything that transpires. So you're going to ask money the first thing that you can think of. Now, if you do this exercise well, then the question that you're going to ask is going to have deep meaning for you. And you need to be intentional about your questions. Imagine that money has actually shown up and said, you know what, I'm here to have a conversation with you. And money has sat down with you. And if you're an analytical type or just a left brain type person, this exercise is just really confusing the heck out of you. Play along with me. Suspend your belief and play along with me. Imagine that you're watching a sci-fi movie, right? Play along with me and just indulge me with this exercise. It's truly powerful, and it's going to do a lot for you. So the questions that you ask have to be intentional, they have to be deep, and they have to be true. So as an example, a question that would easily come to mind if you had a background like I did would be, why do you come and why don't you stay? Why do you come and why don't you stay? And then be silent. And whatever comes up, you write it down. So as an example to that question, when I asked it, one of the many times that I have these conversations, so these conversations don't just stop, right? As you keep breaking your ceilings and as you keep making more money or expanding yourself, you hit new levels, new blocks that you have to sort of undo. So this is a really good exercise to use anytime you hit an obstacle or a block, to do that personification and to have a conversation. And really the idea behind this exercise is to bring to mind what you're really thinking. Because when you know what you're really thinking and how you really feel about something, that's when change happens. Because then you have this information and you can move forward with it. Now, there's some people who have trouble moving forward because then you just get stuck in the feelings and you wallow in it, and that's, that's not good. But if you do this right, then you can see things objectively for what they are and then use that information and move forward. So if you ask money, why do you come and why don't you stay? Why do you come and why don't you stay? For me, one of the first answers that I got, and this just showed up and it showed up from nowhere, and I wrote it down and I was like, whoa. The answer that I got is, you never made a plan for me to stay. You never made a plan for me to stay. You always had things lined up for me to do. So as soon as I came in, you had places for me to go. I never had an opportunity to stay. We never got to be friends. We never got to think about how we could grow together. We never got to think about how the way you treated me was that I was this thing that was just a means to an end. I was like, oh, never really thought about it that way. But it was true, right? Because before the money came in, it was budgeted for. I got to be like, okay, so this paycheck is coming in. This is where it's going. And I had already written everything out for it so that it could go. So it is true. And if you think about it as a human being, would you ever stay if you realize that anytime you went to visit someone, they immediately put you to work on something? Would you visit them? Would you stay? The answer is no, because you would feel used. Why would you stay? Why would you go somewhere where as soon as you arrive, they're like, oh, good, you're here. So I wanted this done. I needed this done. I needed you to go here and I needed you to do this. And can you stretch a little bit further and do this as well? Why would you stay? Why would you stay? And so then I was forced to be more intentional about how I was using my money. And this is where the concept of pay yourself first comes. It was very hard for me to do this at first. I am not going to lie, because I was the kind of person who, for my value system, paying others and getting things paid first was more important than me having any money for myself. And before I started going for massages or going to a spa or anything like that, that's stuff I never did for myself. I just considered it a waste of money. I just couldn't be bothered. So I never had money set aside to go for a massage. It just could not enter my head to do that. For me, that was just a complete waste of time. Instead, I would take that time and that money and use it and go out for, let's say, lunch or dinner with friends or family. And again, I would be spending on others, and that made it okay to spend on myself at the same time because I was spending on others. So I had to go back and look at the way I was spending the money, and it didn't matter how much came in. And in fact, I got tested immediately after, because the amount of money that came in was not as much as I expected or what I was used to. It was actually quite little. And that's something else that's going to happen. Anytime you make a major decision, anything that's life transforming, expect to receive pushback. Life is going to knock you with something that's going to test you. And it's up to you to see that situation for what it is and still continue with your result. It's always going to happen. The moment that you decide you're signing up with a business coach because you're done and you want to elevate your business and you want to grow in profits, is the moment that your car will break down. Is the moment that something huge is going to happen. For me, I was going to California for about 4 days, and this was an up-leveling experience for my personal life and my business. And sure enough, there was a death in the family. And this happens all the time. Now, the thing that I've learned to do now is to look at stuff and then ask myself, what is the next best move? So that I am still in alignment with myself and my life, but I'm also taking into consideration everything that's happening. My learning, my development, none of that stops. In fact, I'm here doing a Facebook Live with you, right? But I am going to go to Kenya to be with my family because that's high on my value list. So going back to what I said before, the money that came in wasn't as much as I expected, right? And when I was looking at it, I had already made the resolution that I would pay myself first. And that not only would I pay myself first, but I would also set aside money to use on myself for something as frivolous as a massage. So when this little money came in, my first instinct was to say, okay, I will do that another day. Let me first take care of the bills. And then I had to stop and sit there. And I was so uncomfortable because I could feel that tension and that pull between the part of me that said, you committed to paying yourself first, and you committed to taking the money and putting some of it aside for yourself. And then there was this other part that was like, how are you going for a massage when you have a bill to pay? How are you going to put money aside when you have other things here that need that cash? How are you going to do that? So I sat there in that very uncomfortable space and let all this happen in my mind and my head. And the idea was not to make a move, right? So anytime you find yourself in a moment of conflict where your true heart's intentions are in conflict with your lived reality, don't make a decision. Just sit there and don't run away. Don't do what you would do any other day to get away from the feelings. Stay there with them. So sit there with them until the feelings all pass, because the one true thing will always remain. So for me, after all the feelings had just gone back and forth with each other, and I didn't do anything, didn't make a decision, didn't decide anything, went about the usual activities for the day. And when my mind had settled and quieted, I sat down and I was silent for a few moments because I wanted to see what the verdict was. And the verdict was, pay yourself first. Pay yourself first. And take yourself for that massage. And don't worry about the money. The money will always come. The money will always come. But if you want to change your situation with your money, you're going to have to change the way you interact with it. And that's how you make your break. That's how you get yourself into a different place when it comes to money. Now, that was a very small, almost insignificant moment, but it did things for me that then I could not understand. But what it did is it validated me as a person. It validated me as a person who goes out and works hard and makes the money and deserves to spend that money on myself, including on things that may seem insignificant. It also let me know what my priorities now were, and I was putting myself at the top there in self-care. It also let me know that I didn't care how much was coming in. I wasn't going to react. I was going to be proactive over the amounts of money coming in, regardless of how much was coming in or when it was coming in. And it also taught me to slow down and to pause, because when we make our decisions and we're running, then what we're doing is we're forcing our body into this fight, flight, freeze mode, and we start to make decisions that are not rational. At the moment, they seem rational because that's what you're staring at. But when you force yourself to pause, then what it does is it brings things into perspective and you're able to make a decision from there. My bills got paid, but I went for the massage, and that was the point. The point is your stuff will always be taken care of. Even right now, I can ask you, think of a time when you absolutely had no money in your account. And you probably will have a memory or two, right? If this is the case. But then I'll say, but you're here now, So obviously you ate something or you stayed somewhere. You're here now. We forget all these small incidents, but it's just that at that time, it's such a big deal. It's, it's just this overwhelming thing that you're staring at. When really, we just need that perspective and to pause and to relax and to think about it as nature. So when you think about money, I want you to start being conscious about your thoughts around it. And if you find yourself thinking quickly and the thoughts are like just coming in, you're like, I don't know how I'm going to make my money. I don't know where I'm going to get clients from. I don't know how I'm going to grow my business. I don't know how I'm going to get extra help. I don't know how I'm going to slow down. And even as the thoughts come in, don't respond to them. Don't engage. This is something that's going to happen because it's something that you're used to. It's something that you've sort of gone into default over. So we're trying to break this. We're breaking this. And to break it is to engage in new behaviors and new ways of thinking. And then just realize that, you know, the same way you have trees grow, the same way you have grass grow, the same way you have air in the air, the same way the same way you blink without thinking about it, the same way your heart will beat without asking you for permission, is the same way money will come and go. And you can't trust it to stay because you're going to be doing your part. And your part comes in with the decisions that you make so that it stays. So when you look at, you know, how much you spend, so, you know, like I'll speak with a lot of people and they're like, I want to work with you, I want to work with you, I want to work with you, but I don't have the money. Truth is, you do. You've just been spending it on what you've considered a priority. And I'm not a priority. So, because if you go and you look again at your online banking records and just calculate how much you spent on coffee or tea or anything. So now for some of you, it wouldn't be coffee or tea. I remember back in the day when my financial advisor would tell me this, I would be like, that's not me. I don't use stuff like that on coffee or tea. And I'd feel really uppity and should say, okay, so just go take a look and see where you're spending it. And sure enough, we all have things that we indulge in which we don't really think about it because we don't. And if you add that amount up together, you'll realize that, yeah, you did have the money to invest in your development. You did have the money to invest in your growth, in a program, in a course, in an event, whatever the case may be, right? It's just a matter of priorities. Now, here is the biggest thing, and I kept it till last. Thank you for staying with me. I appreciate this. Here's the biggest thing when it comes to money mindset, and I kept it till last because it's a really hard thing to understand, especially if you're new to this. But the fastest way to change your money mindset is to actually make a purchase that completely rocks your world. That completely shifts the way you think. And the same goes with any other kind of decision-making process. It's one thing to say, I have decided that I'm going to do this, or I have decided that I'm going to go there. It's quite another to say, buy a ticket, or pay for a course, or hire a coach, or hire a web designer, or hire somebody that you need, or a virtual assistant, someone that you need to assist you in your business. And to be like, okay, now I have to come up with that money. That's really different. And the funny thing is, you find that you move faster and doors will open quicker when you've made your commitment and you've put out that signal, and it's a huge energy blast out into the universe that says, this is what I've decided on, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going. Things move quickly. This is when you find someone who's been listening to you who says, oh, by the way, did you want to come out and present to our group? This is when opportunities arise. And the reason is that you've made an investment that forces you to now open yourself up to all the opportunities that are around you to support you in your decision. That's the difference between actually putting your money where your mouth is than saying, oh, I'm just going to save for that. I'm going to save for that. I'm going to save for that. There'll always be something that will arise that will take that money so that you'll never get to use it when you wanted to use it and for what you wanted to use it for. That's exactly how it goes. So for those who say, I want to do this, and then, but, then they'll find that they never do it. And that becomes just the script. And you know this because when you speak with some people, sometimes you hear them say something that they said over 3 years ago, and a part of you is like, what? Are you still planning on doing that or going there or seeing that? But it's a script and it's unconscious because it's something that they've repeated so often and so much that they've believed it, that it's become a part of their consciousness, which means that for them, they're just repeating it. Oh yeah, I'm still planning on going for that. Oh yeah, I'm still planning on going for that. I spoke with someone the other day, and 10 years ago, she had wanted to work with me. 10 years later, she still wants to work with me. The same script, the same script. And while she was speaking, I realized that she wasn't even fully conscious of what she was saying. Because if she was, she would have stopped herself and said, wait a minute, like, wait a minute, I'm actually a decade older and this is what I'm still saying, right? But it became that unconscious script. So one of the things that I know for myself is that, and it's true of a lot of people, and if you look at the people who are really highly successful in the areas in which you want to be successful at, is that they make that huge, bold decision, they put a stake in it, and they put a large enough stake that they have to actually rise up to the occasion to meet up with it. So, you know, if someone says, I want to start getting healthy, there's a difference between, I want to start getting healthy and going to the gym downstairs and saying, I signed up for the 5K run. You're going to have to get up. You're going to have to get up and work yourself into that position to make it for that 5K run. And that's what I mean by that. So when it comes to your money mindset, let's first start from the basics. Look at what people were thinking, how they influenced your decision, see how that's playing out in your regular life, and also start making the decisions and putting your money where your mouth is so that it can force you to elevate as you keep going. And there's a lot more on money mindset that we can talk about, but and we have gone on for, you know, close to an hour here. But if you have any questions or anything like that, write them over in the comment box or in the Facebook group. I'm more than happy to answer. Tomorrow we're talking about self-love. This is really, really important because a lot of people believe that they love themselves or that they don't love themselves, whatever the relationship is with themselves. And for me, one of the litmus tests is, are you able to sit in your very uncomfortable thoughts and not have any judgment around them? More on that tomorrow and how it's going to be, how it's related to your business success, okay? Take care, have fun. Thanks for joining.